The courtroom was quiet, almost too quiet. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows on the polished wooden floors. The air smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. People whispered softly, shuffling papers and adjusting their seats, waiting for the proceedings to begin. At the far end of the room, the judge sat behind a tall, imposing desk. He was a man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a reputation for being stern, sometimes even cold. He tapped his gavel lightly, signaling the start, but his gaze lingered curiously on someone standing near the entrance. That someone was a teenager. He was dressed simply in a plain shirt and trousers, nothing that suggested he belonged in a courtroom, let alone in front of a judge. His hair was neatly combed, and he carried himself with a calm confidence, though a hint of nervousness flickered in his eyes. He wasn't tall, and he didn't have the presence of someone used to commanding attention. To anyone glancing at him quickly, he seemed just like any other teen trying to find his place in a world of adults. The judge's eyes narrowed slightly. He was used to dealing with seasoned lawyers, clients with polished stories, or sometimes even the occasional bold witness. A teenager? In his courtroom? He raised an eyebrow and leaned back in his chair. "And what, may I ask, brings a young man like you here today?" he said, his voice carrying a mixture of curiosity and mild amusement. The teen didn't flinch. He stood straight, shoulders squared, and replied politely, his voice steady. "I am here to present my argument regarding the case before the court, Your Honor." A ripple of murmurs ran through the courtroom. Some people whispered to each other, exchanging looks of disbelief or mild amusement. The judge's lips twitched as if holding back a smirk. A teenager presenting a legal argument? "Well, this I must see," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The courtroom, sensing his condescension, leaned in with a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. The teen walked slowly toward the center of the courtroom. He held a folder in his hands filled with neatly organized notes. Each step was deliberate, controlled. He didn't rush and he didn't stumble. Every movement suggested that he had prepared thoroughly. Despite his young age, he carried an air of quiet authority, the kind that makes people pause and wonder if they are underestimating someone. The attorneys for the other side exchanged quick glances, smirking slightly. They didn't see him as a threat. They assumed he would fumble, that his nervousness would give them an easy advantage. The teen reached the middle of the courtroom, placed the folder on the table, and opened it with careful precision. He glanced briefly at his notes, then looked up, meeting the judge's eyes. The judge leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. "Well, young man, the court is all ears. Let us see what you have prepared." The teen nodded respectfully. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said. Then he paused, taking a slow breath. His mind was racing, but he controlled it carefully, focusing on clarity, precision, and timing. He had spent countless hours studying the details of the case, reviewing laws, precedents, and possible arguments. Every point he planned to make had been carefully considered and practiced until it could be delivered naturally and convincingly. He began speaking. At first, his words were measured, cautious, almost tentative, as if he were testing the waters. "Your Honor, I understand that my age might suggest inexperience. I ask only for the chance to present my findings and reasoning regarding this case." His voice was calm, polite, yet carried a subtle strength that made people straighten in their seats. The judge raised a hand slightly, a gesture of mild impatience mixed with intrigue. "Very well. Proceed," he said, his tone neutral, but with a trace of skepticism. The teen unfolded his argument carefully. He spoke in clear, concise sentences, breaking down complex ideas into understandable pieces. He didn't rush and he didn't overcomplicate things. With each point, he referenced specific details of the case, connecting facts to legal principles. His voice carried confidence but never arrogance. He asked questions that led the listeners to see flaws in the opposing arguments without directly attacking anyone. It was subtle but effective. The courtroom began to shift in atmosphere. The whispers turned to attentive silence. Eyes that had been rolling or skeptical now focused intently on him. Even the opposing attorneys paused, trying to catch every word, their earlier smirks fading into concentration. They had expected an amateur performance, something easy to counter. Instead, they were witnessing someone who thought like a seasoned lawyer, someone who could see angles and implications they had overlooked. The teen's hands moved naturally as he spoke, pointing to key documents, flipping through pages with ease. He made eye contact with the judge occasionally, not to challenge him but to guide him through the reasoning step by step. Every sentence was intentional, every pause strategically placed to allow the information to sink in. He had learned that people often underestimate pauses, that silence can be as powerful as words. The judge leaned back, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. He had not expected this. He had expected hesitation, uncertainty, perhaps even mistakes. But what he saw was clarity, logic, and preparation. The teen was not just repeating memorized phrases. He was analyzing, interpreting, and connecting ideas in real time. It was impressive, and the judge could not hide it. The teen paused briefly to glance at his notes again, then continued. Furthermore, Your Honor, considering the previous case precedents, it becomes clear that the interpretation of these facts must be consistent with established legal standards. I have reviewed the relevant statutes and case law to ensure that this argument aligns with both the letter and spirit of the law. Murmurs swept through the courtroom again, but this time they were not dismissive. People leaned forward, curious, intrigued, impressed. The judge's hand twitched, holding the gavel, but he did not strike it. His mind raced, trying to reconcile what he had assumed about this teen with the reality before him. The teen continued, outlining logical steps and evidence meticulously. He didn't speak too quickly, and he didn't waste words. His approach was methodical, almost surgical, but delivered with a natural flow that made it easy to follow. Each point led naturally to the next, creating a coherent and persuasive narrative. His voice carried determination and focus, but also humility. He never boasted, never seemed to overstep. He simply presented facts and reasoning, allowing the strength of the argument to speak for itself. By the time he paused to take another breath, the entire courtroom had shifted. The judge, the attorneys, and even the spectators had stopped talking, stopped whispering. All eyes were on him. People who had doubted him now found themselves reconsidering everything they thought about age, appearance, and capability. The teen had not yet finished, but already he had earned respect that many in that room took years to gain. The teen closed his folder briefly, signaling a transition to a new point. Your Honor, it is important to consider the broader implications of this case. The decision here will set a precedent that affects not just the parties involved, but the wider community and how similar cases are approached in the future. It is with this responsibility in mind that I present my conclusions and recommendations. A hush fell over the courtroom. The gravity of his words was not lost on anyone. Even the judge felt the weight of responsibility, and a flicker of admiration crossed his features. He had underestimated the boy, but now he could not ignore the intelligence, preparation, and composure displayed before him. The teen continued, moving seamlessly from point to point. His arguments were clear, logical, and supported by evidence. He anticipated counterpoints and addressed them before they were raised. He used examples that were relevant and compelling, drawing connections between facts and law that most adults would have struggled to articulate so clearly. Every word, every gesture reinforced the impression of someone who belonged here, even if they looked far too young to do so. Minutes passed, then an hour, but the teen showed no sign of fatigue. His focus never wavered. He engaged with the courtroom, making eye contact with witnesses, lawyers, and the judge in a manner that invited trust and attention. He spoke with conviction, but never with arrogance. Every sentence was intentional, crafted to guide the listener's understanding and decision-making. By the time he finished this first part of his argument, there was a moment of silence. The courtroom seemed frozen, everyone processing what they had just witnessed. The judge, usually quick to assert authority and dismiss less experienced speakers, remained silent, his eyes fixed on the teen. There was a visible shift in the atmosphere, a recognition that this was no ordinary teenager. This was someone who had earned attention, respect, and perhaps even admiration, all without demanding it. The teen took a step back, nodded respectfully to the judge, and quietly returned to his seat. There was no dramatic flourish, no attempt to seek applause. He simply sat down, calm, collected, and seemingly ordinary once more. But the impact of his presence lingered in the room. People were no longer seeing a teenage boy. They were seeing someone capable, someone prepared, someone who had just subtly turned expectations upside down. As he sat there, the teen's mind did not rest. He observed the reactions of those around him, noting how the judge's posture had changed, how the attorneys were now speaking more carefully to each other, how the spectators leaned in with interest. He knew that the first impression had been deceptive on purpose, that by allowing them to underestimate him, he had created an opportunity to command attention when it mattered most. The judge cleared his throat finally, breaking the silence. "Well," he said slowly, as if weighing his words, and that was unexpected. There was no mockery now, only a faint acknowledgement of the skill and preparation that had been displayed. The teen simply nodded, maintaining his composed demeanor, aware that this was just the beginning of a longer process, but satisfied that the foundation had been laid. The courtroom would remember this day, not just for the case itself, but for the quiet, unassuming teenager who walked in, faced skepticism and mockery, and began to show the world that intelligence, preparation, and composure are not bound by age. That first part of the day had set the tone for what was to come, and everyone present sensed it, even if they could not yet fully articulate why. Outside the courtroom, the sun continued to stream through the windows, falling on the polished floors, catching on the edges of folders and papers. But inside, attention was fixed on the young teen who, despite the weight of expectation and the challenge ahead, remained calm, poised, and ready to continue proving that he was more than what anyone had assumed. The courtroom had changed subtly since the teen had spoken. The air was charged with curiosity and tension, a quiet expectation that something unusual was unfolding. The attorneys on the other side exchanged nervous glances, realizing that their earlier smirks and confident gestures were no longer appropriate. They had assumed he would falter, but now they were uncertain how to respond. Every eye in the room was watching, assessing, waiting for the next move. The judge sat in his high chair, leaning slightly forward, elbows resting on the polished wood. His usual stern expression had softened just enough to reveal a flicker of intrigue. He was a man who had seen many clever lawyers, but there was something different about this teenager. There was precision, patience, and a clarity in his approach that was rare even among seasoned professionals. The judge's mind was racing, trying to anticipate what was coming next. The teen remained seated for a moment, quietly reviewing the next section of his notes. His hands moved carefully, turning pages without a sound. Despite the intensity of the courtroom, he felt calm. He had anticipated this moment for months. Every question, every objection, every possible argument had been rehearsed and analyzed. Yet he maintained flexibility, ready to adjust if the unexpected occurred. The opposing attorney finally spoke. "Your Honor," he began, his voice cautious now, "we would like to challenge the points just presented by this young man. Some of his interpretations seem unusual." There was a slight tremor of uncertainty in his tone, betraying the fact that he had not expected the argument to be so thorough and persuasive. The teen raised his hand slightly, a polite gesture indicating he would address the points raised. "If the court allows, I would like to clarify these interpretations. They are based on both the letter of the law and established precedents, and I believe they align closely with the intended application in this case." The judge nodded slowly. "Proceed, young man. Clarify your reasoning." He began again, carefully articulating each point. This time his words were not just statements of fact. They were precise explanations detailing the logic behind every decision and interpretation. He dissected the opposing arguments, pointing out small but significant inconsistencies without attacking anyone personally. His tone was calm, respectful, and persuasive, commanding attention without demanding it. As he spoke, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew more focused. Spectators leaned forward, lawyers scribbled notes, and the judge's eyebrows furrowed as he followed the logic. It was clear that the teen was not only knowledgeable, but also strategic. He was aware of how to present information so that it was digestible, compelling, and difficult to refute. He paused for a moment to allow his points to settle. Silence filled the room, a silence that was thick with anticipation. The judge's fingers drummed lightly on the wooden surface of his desk. He had seen many young lawyers, interns, and apprentices, but none had commanded the courtroom in this way. He had assumed that a teenager would be overwhelmed, nervous, or unprepared, but this boy was none of those things. The teen continued, now moving into the nuances of the case. He referenced past rulings, citing details that even the seasoned attorneys in the room had overlooked. Each reference was followed by a clear explanation of its relevance, showing a depth of understanding that was exceptional for someone so young. He was not merely repeating memorized phrases. He was connecting ideas, predicting counterarguments, and constructing a narrative that was difficult to dispute. There was a subtle shift in the room. The opposing attorneys exchanged uncertain glances, their earlier confidence replaced by tension. They began to speak more cautiously, aware that the boy's insight and preparation could expose weaknesses in their case. Even small details that might have been dismissed previously were now scrutinized under his precise analysis. The judge leaned back slightly, his expression one of measured surprise. He had expected a brief, unremarkable presentation, perhaps some nervous stammering, maybe even errors that could be easily countered. Instead, he was witnessing a methodical and coherent presentation that left little room for doubt. The teen's preparation was meticulous, his reasoning was sound, and his delivery was confident yet composed. Throughout all of this, the teen maintained a calm presence. He made eye contact, gestured naturally, and spoke with clarity. There was no pretense, no overconfidence, no showmanship. Each word and action was deliberate, designed to convey logic and credibility. He had learned that courtroom persuasion was not about theatrics. It was about clarity, evidence, and timing. A moment came when the opposing attorney attempted to interject, raising an objection. The teen listened carefully, nodding to acknowledge the point before responding. His response was measured and respectful, addressing the objection while reinforcing his original argument. He used logic, evidence, and reasoning to dismantle the objection without showing frustration or irritation. The courtroom was silent, absorbing the skill displayed before them. The spectators, who had initially been skeptical or amused, were now fully engaged. Many whispered quietly to each other, amazed by the teen's ability to navigate the complexities of the law. Some shook their heads in disbelief, unable to reconcile his appearance with his capability. Others simply leaned forward, intent on catching every detail, every word, every nuance. The teen moved seamlessly from one point to the next. He addressed legal principles, facts of the case, and potential outcomes with equal clarity. Each section of his argument was structured to build upon the last, creating a coherent and persuasive narrative. His voice carried a calm authority that drew listeners in, and his demeanor suggested someone who was both knowledgeable and trustworthy. As the session continued, it became evident that the courtroom dynamic had shifted. The judge, who had begun the day with subtle mockery, now regarded the teen with cautious respect. He listened intently, nodding occasionally, clearly impressed by the depth of understanding and the skillful presentation. The opposing attorneys were more reserved, aware that their strategy needed to adapt in real time. At one point, the teen paused to consider a potential counterpoint. He had anticipated it, but he wanted to ensure that his response was precise and effective. He glanced at his notes briefly, then addressed the court. Considering the potential objections, Your Honor, I have analyzed similar cases and relevant statutes. It is clear that the conclusion I am presenting not only aligns with legal precedent but also serves the interests of justice in this situation. There was another pause, allowing the information to settle. The judge's hand hovered over the gavel but remained still. He was struck by the composure and clarity of the argument. Every observer in the courtroom could sense that this was no ordinary performance. The teen was demonstrating skills, insight, and confidence far beyond his years. The teen continued, carefully guiding the court through the complexities of the case. He addressed details that might have been overlooked, clarified ambiguous points, and reinforced his main argument without repetition or redundancy. His methodical approach made it difficult for anyone to dispute his reasoning. Each point was connected logically to the next, creating a persuasive and compelling narrative. As the session wore on, it became clear that the initial skepticism toward the teen had vanished. People who had doubted him were now listening with admiration, recognizing the level of preparation and intelligence required to perform at this level. The courtroom was no longer a place of casual observation. It was a place of active engagement, where every listener was fully absorbed in the unfolding argument. The teen's calm demeanor, clear reasoning, and articulate presentation left an impression that words alone could not capture. He demonstrated that age and appearance are often misleading indicators of ability. The lesson was subtle but powerful. Intelligence, preparation, and composure can defy expectations and command respect in any setting. By the time the morning session concluded, the atmosphere in the courtroom had changed entirely. The judge, the attorneys, and the spectators all recognized that the teen was not to be underestimated. There was a quiet acknowledgement of his skill, a shared understanding that what they had witnessed was extraordinary. The teen collected his notes, carefully closing his folder. He nodded politely to the judge in the courtroom, maintaining the same calm and respectful demeanor that had defined his presentation. He had not sought attention or applause, but his presence and performance had left a lasting mark. Everyone in the courtroom sensed that this was only the beginning, that more was to come, and that the teen's abilities would continue to challenge their assumptions. As people began to stretch and shift in their seats, the teen remained seated for a moment longer, reflecting on the morning's events. He knew that the next part of the proceedings would present new challenges, but he felt prepared. His careful observation of reactions, his understanding of the legal issues, and his ability to think several steps ahead gave him confidence. The stage was set for what promised to be an even more compelling display of skill, intelligence, and strategy. The judge called for a short recess, and the courtroom slowly emptied, leaving a sense of anticipation hanging in the air. Whispers filled the hallways, speculating about the young boy who had so quietly and effectively turned expectations upside down. The teen walked out calmly, blending into the crowd, his expression composed but thoughtful, aware that the real challenge was yet to unfold. The tension and curiosity of the courtroom would carry forward, setting the stage for the next part of his remarkable journey. The courtroom felt heavier now, as if the weight of expectations and curiosity had settled over every person present. After the recess, the room gradually filled again, this time with a more attentive and cautious air. Spectators who had initially come to watch a teenage boy stumble through a presentation now entered with a sense of anticipation, unsure of what to expect but aware that the previous session had been extraordinary. The teen returned to the center of the courtroom, folder in hand. There was no rush, no dramatic gestures, only the quiet confidence of someone who knew precisely what he needed to do. He walked calmly, each step measured and deliberate, demonstrating the same poise that had impressed the court before the break. He paused briefly, nodding respectfully to the judge, then placed his folder carefully on the table. The judge's eyes lingered on him, curiosity mingled with an emerging respect. He had begun the day expecting to see a nervous, inexperienced teenager. Now he was watching someone who spoke with clarity, authority, and insight. The initial amusement and subtle mockery were gone, replaced by a careful attention that suggested he was no longer underestimating the boy. The teen opened his folder, turning to the next section of his notes. He began speaking softly, methodically, yet with a strength in his tone that drew everyone's attention. Your Honor, I would like to address the remaining aspects of the case, specifically those that might not be immediately obvious but have significant implications. His voice was calm, respectful, but carried a quiet confidence that compelled the audience to listen. He outlined the subtleties of the case, explaining not only the facts but also the broader consequences of each potential decision. His reasoning was logical, precise, and backed by evidence, but he presented it in a way that made it easy for anyone to understand. He avoided overly technical jargon, instead using clear explanations and relatable examples that guided the listeners through complex ideas without confusion. The opposing attorneys were visibly uneasy. They had expected a standard argument from a young presenter, something that could be challenged easily. Instead, they were confronted with meticulous analysis and anticipatory reasoning. The teen addressed potential objections before they were raised, demonstrating not only knowledge but strategic foresight. Each point he made highlighted the gaps and weaknesses in the opposing arguments, and he did so respectfully, without confrontation or unnecessary criticism. The spectators were captivated. Some leaned forward, murmuring quietly among themselves. Others sat with wide eyes, astonished at the clarity and maturity of the presentation. Whispers of admiration and disbelief spread through the room as the teen methodically explained his points, connecting facts, precedents, and logic in a seamless flow. It was clear that he had anticipated reactions and questions, and he had prepared solutions and explanations for each. The judge, usually reserved and authoritative, leaned forward on his desk, listening intently. He had expected to correct mistakes or guide a hesitant speaker. Now he was confronted with an argument that was coherent, persuasive, and well-organized. He made notes silently, his expression shifting between surprise and admiration. The realization was dawning. This teen was not only capable but exceptionally skilled. The teen paused briefly, giving everyone a moment to absorb his points. He glanced at his notes, then looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, in considering the implications of this case, it is essential to evaluate both the immediate and long-term effects. The precedent set here will influence similar cases for years to come. Therefore, it is crucial to base any decision on both established law and sound reasoning, which I have outlined in my presentation. A hush fell over the courtroom. Even the opposing attorneys had stopped whispering, their focus entirely on the teen. They exchanged subtle glances, acknowledging that he had skillfully addressed issues they had assumed would be simple to counter. They were now forced to reconsider their approach, recognizing that this was not a standard presentation, but a strategic, highly intelligent argument, the teen continued, dissecting the opposing arguments with care. He highlighted inconsistencies and points that required clarification, guiding the judge and audience through each one with patience and precision. Every sentence was deliberate, every gesture purposeful. He maintained a calm, authoritative presence that commanded respect without demanding it. His approach was subtle yet powerful, convincing the audience not through theatrics but through reason and clarity. He referenced case law, demonstrating his familiarity with legal precedents and their relevance. Unlike many adults who might overcomplicate or misapply these references, he presented them with simplicity and clarity, showing how they directly influence the current situation. He connected historical decisions to the present case, making logical predictions about possible outcomes. This analytical approach impressed everyone, from the judge to the spectators, illustrating a level of understanding rare even among experienced attorneys. As he spoke, the judge began to nod slightly, acknowledging the strength of the arguments. There was no need for words. His gestures alone conveyed respect. The courtroom had shifted from skepticism and doubt to attention and admiration. The teen's careful reasoning and calm delivery had changed the dynamic, transforming initial underestimation into genuine recognition of talent and intellect. The teen paused again, allowing a moment for his analysis to sink in. He looked around the courtroom, making eye contact with the opposing attorneys and spectators alike. In conclusion, he said softly but firmly, the evidence, the legal precedents, and the logical reasoning all support the position I have presented. The decision should be based on objective analysis, ensuring fairness and consistency in accordance with the law. The courtroom remained silent for a few moments, everyone absorbing the clarity and precision of his argument. The opposing attorneys were now clearly recalculating, unsure how to respond to someone who had anticipated their points and addressed them before they were made. The spectators, once casual observers, were now engaged, fully aware that they were witnessing something remarkable. The judge's expression shifted from cautious observation to subtle astonishment. He had seen many skilled lawyers in his career, but rarely had he encountered someone so young with such clarity of thought and mastery of complex legal concepts. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the desk, and regarded the teen with genuine curiosity. This was no ordinary teenager, and he realized it fully for the first time. The teen, noticing the judge's reaction, maintained his composure. He did not boast or demand recognition. He simply presented the facts and reasoning as he had prepared. His calm demeanor, combined with the strength of his argument, created an undeniable impression on everyone present. The courtroom had shifted from skepticism to respect, from amusement to intrigue, all due to the quiet power of preparation and intellect. The opposing attorneys attempted to interject, but the teen had anticipated their objections. He responded with clear explanations, dismantling their arguments methodically and without confrontation. Each point he made reinforced the strength of his case and highlighted the gaps in the opposing position. His strategic foresight, combined with analytical skill, left the attorneys momentarily speechless, their confidence replaced by caution. The spectators watched in awe as the teen continued, explaining the nuances of the case, the possible outcomes, and the implications for future decisions. He spoke with clarity, precision, and humility, never losing focus or composure. The courtroom, once filled with casual observation and doubt, was now fully engaged, captivated by the extraordinary performance of someone they had initially underestimated. By the end of this segment, the courtroom was quiet, the weight of realization settling over everyone. The judge, the attorneys, and the spectators all understood that they had underestimated the teen's capabilities. What had begun as a situation ripe for mockery had transformed into a demonstration of intelligence, preparation, and strategic thinking. The teen had not only presented a compelling argument but had fundamentally shifted perceptions. The judge cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "I must admit," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully, "that your presentation is impressive, more than I anticipated." There was no trace of mockery, only acknowledgement of the skill, preparation, and clarity he had witnessed. The teen nodded respectfully, maintaining his composed demeanor, aware that this was still only part of the journey. As the session concluded, the teen carefully gathered his notes, closing his folder with precision. He returned to his seat, calm and collected, his demeanor unchanged despite the shifting perceptions around him. The courtroom had been transformed by his argument, the dynamic altered, and respect earned not through force or showmanship, but through preparation, clarity, and intelligence. Outside the courtroom, whispers and quiet conversations circulated. People were astonished by the performance, by the insight and maturity displayed by someone so young. Even the opposing attorneys recognized the skill and strategic thinking at work, understanding that they had underestimated someone who clearly possessed exceptional talent. The teen remained composed, reflecting silently on the morning's events. He knew that the next steps would require careful observation, continued analysis, and strategic engagement. The foundation had been laid, perceptions had shifted, and the stage was set for the moment of revelation. Everyone in the courtroom was aware that the day had taken an unexpected turn, and that the next moments would reveal the true extent of his abilities. The courtroom fell silent as the afternoon session began, the atmosphere tense with anticipation. Everyone present had already witnessed the teenage boy's astonishing arguments, but there was a sense that the day had more surprises in store. The judge, now fully attentive, leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on the young presenter. There was no longer any hint of amusement in his expression. Instead, a growing curiosity and cautious respect had taken its place. The teen rose slowly, placing his folder carefully on the table. He took a deep breath, pausing briefly to gather his thoughts. His calm composure contrasted sharply with the intensity in the courtroom. Every movement, every gesture was deliberate, reflecting his focus and preparation. The spectators leaned forward, aware that they were about to witness the next chapter of an extraordinary story. He began speaking in a steady, confident voice. "Your Honor, before we proceed further, I would like to address some critical points that will clarify not only the legal aspects but also the practical implications of this case." His tone was respectful but carried a quiet authority that drew everyone's attention. As he continued, the teen guided the courtroom through intricate details that had not been discussed earlier. He highlighted subtle nuances in the evidence, explaining how minor facts could significantly influence the outcome. His reasoning was precise, logical, and meticulously supported by references to statutes and legal precedents. Each point was articulated clearly, without exaggeration or unnecessary complexity, making it accessible to everyone present. The opposing attorneys exchanged uneasy glances. Their initial confidence had been shaken by the morning's presentation, and now they found themselves struggling to respond. Every objection they attempted to raise was anticipated and addressed with clarity and professionalism. The teen's strategic foresight and meticulous preparation left little room for argument, forcing them to reconsider their approach at every step. The spectators were captivated. They whispered quietly, sharing their astonishment at the young boy's performance. Many shook their heads in disbelief, unable to reconcile his youthful appearance with the depth of understanding he displayed. The courtroom, once filled with casual curiosity and mild amusement, had transformed into a focused, attentive audience. Hanging on every word, the judge, usually quick to assert authority, now listened intently. His fingers rested on the gavel, but he did not strike it. He was observing, processing, and realizing that the teenager before him was far more capable than he had ever imagined. The subtle mockery that had characterized his initial impression had vanished completely, replaced by respect and a keen interest in understanding the boy's capabilities. The teen continued, carefully unpacking complex legal reasoning in a manner that was easy to follow. He used examples, analogies, and logical sequences to ensure that his points were understood. Each explanation reinforced the strength of his argument, making it clear that he had anticipated every question and potential challenge. His calm delivery and thorough preparation created an undeniable impression on everyone in the courtroom. As he concluded the detailed portion of his argument, he paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. The courtroom remained silent, every person absorbing the depth of his reasoning. He looked directly at the judge and said, "Your Honor, I understand that my appearance and age might suggest inexperience. However, I hope my presentation has demonstrated the level of preparation, knowledge, and understanding that I bring to this case." The judge's eyes widened slightly. There was a moment of stunned silence. The realization began to dawn on him that this was no ordinary teenager. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk, and regarded the teen with a mixture of astonishment and curiosity. "I must admit," he said carefully, "I underestimated you." The teen remained calm, nodding respectfully. Then, in a measured tone, he continued, "Your Honor, I am fully licensed to practice law and have been involved in cases at this level for some time. My presence in this courtroom today as a teenager is intentional, designed to demonstrate a specific point and engage with this case from a unique perspective." A ripple of shock ran through the courtroom. The spectators gasped softly, exchanging astonished glances. The opposing attorneys froze, caught completely off guard by this revelation. The judge leaned back in his chair, momentarily speechless. He had expected a talented but ordinary youth. He had not anticipated that the teen was, in fact, a fully qualified attorney. The teen continued, calmly explaining his reasons for appearing in disguise. He had chosen this approach to highlight the dangers of underestimating individuals based on age, appearance, or assumptions. By presenting himself as a teenager, he created a situation that challenged perceptions and revealed the power of preparation, knowledge, and strategy. His words were clear, measured, and persuasive, leaving little room for doubt. The judge, now fully attentive, nodded slowly, absorbing the explanation. The previous mockery and skepticism had transformed into genuine respect. He realized that the teen's performance was not only a demonstration of legal skill, but also a lesson in humility and the importance of evaluating people based on ability rather than appearance. The opposing attorneys were still processing the revelation. They had approached the case with a sense of ease, assuming that a young boy would be simple to counter. Now they recognized that they had misjudged the situation entirely. Their strategies would need to be reconsidered, and their respect for the teen's intellect had grown significantly. The spectators were equally astonished. Conversations buzzed quietly with murmurs of admiration and disbelief. Many whispered about the extraordinary courage, intelligence, and skill required to execute such a plan. The courtroom had witnessed not only a brilliant legal presentation, but also a remarkable demonstration of strategic thinking and composure. The teen, maintaining his calm and respectful demeanor, addressed the court once more. "Your Honor, my intention is not to surprise or intimidate anyone, but to present the facts and reasoning of this case in a clear and effective manner. I hope that my approach today has demonstrated that age and appearance are not reliable indicators of capability or understanding." The judge nodded, his expression now a mixture of admiration and reflection. "Indeed," he said softly, "you have taught all of us an important lesson. I apologize for my earlier underestimation." There was sincerity in his voice, and the teen accepted the acknowledgement with a simple nod, understanding that the purpose of the lesson had been fulfilled. The courtroom atmosphere had shifted entirely. What had begun as skepticism and amusement had transformed into admiration, respect, and engagement. The teen's revelation had not only surprised the judge and attorneys, but also challenged the assumptions of everyone present. His calm, precise, and thoughtful approach had conveyed intelligence and authority far beyond his years. As the session continued, the teen addressed remaining details of the case with the same clarity and strategic foresight. He guided the court through final points, anticipated questions, and presented logical conclusions. His presence in the courtroom was now fully respected, and his insights were acknowledged with attention and seriousness. By the end of the session, the courtroom had been transformed. The judge, the attorneys, and the spectators had all gained a new understanding of capability, preparation, and strategic thinking. The teen had not only presented a compelling argument, but had also revealed a deeper lesson about perception, respect, and the potential of individuals to exceed expectations. As the session concluded, the judge addressed the teen with genuine respect. "You have shown remarkable skill and insight today. I am grateful for the clarity and preparation you have brought to this case." The teen nodded humbly, acknowledging the praise without arrogance. The spectators remained silent for a moment, reflecting on what they had witnessed. Conversations began to rise gradually, filled with admiration and amazement at the teen's intellect and courage. Even the opposing attorneys had a newfound respect, recognizing the brilliance of his approach and the skill with which he had executed his plan. The teen collected his notes carefully, closing his folder with precision. He left the center of the courtroom with calm confidence, his demeanor unchanged by the reactions around him. The impact of his revelation lingered, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. The courtroom had witnessed not only legal skill, but a remarkable demonstration of strategic thinking, preparation, and the courage to challenge assumptions. As people began to disperse, whispers and quiet conversations reflected the awe and respect inspired by the teen. The judge remained seated, deep in thought, realizing that the day had been far more instructive than he had anticipated. The teen had accomplished more than presenting a case. He had reshaped perceptions, earned respect, and demonstrated that true capability is measured not by appearance or age, but by knowledge, preparation, and composure. Outside the courtroom, the teen walked calmly, aware of the reactions but focused on the task completed. He had not sought recognition or applause, yet he had left a profound impact on everyone present. The revelation of his identity had transformed the courtroom, and the lesson in humility, respect, and perception would be remembered for a long time. The courtroom settled into a quiet hum after the revelation. People were still processing the shock that the teenage boy they had once dismissed was, in fact, a fully licensed attorney. The energy in the room was a mix of awe, curiosity, and reflection. Conversations that had started as whispers of doubt now turned to admiration and respect. Everyone was aware that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. The teen remained calm, composed, and attentive. He did not seek to draw attention to himself or relish the astonishment around him. Instead, he focused on the remaining aspects of the case, aware that the legal matters were still of utmost importance. His presence in the courtroom, once questioned, was now fully respected, and he used that respect to guide the discussion with clarity and poise. The judge, still seated behind the elevated desk, looked at the teen with a newfound appreciation. "I must admit," he said slowly, his voice measured, "that I have learned an important lesson today. Your presentation, your reasoning, and now your revelation have all challenged my assumptions and those of everyone in this room." There was sincerity in his tone, a rare vulnerability from a man used to control and authority. The teen nodded respectfully. "Thank you, Your Honor. My intention was never to surprise or embarrass anyone, but to present the facts clearly and to ensure that this case is approached with fairness and thorough understanding." The opposing attorneys, previously confident and slightly dismissive, now listened with genuine respect. They had underestimated him at every step, and the revelation had forced them to reevaluate not only the case but also their perceptions. Their previous strategies had faltered against his careful reasoning, foresight, and ability to anticipate objections. They now understood that the boy's intellect and preparation were formidable. The teen proceeded to address the remaining issues in the case. He laid out his analysis with precision, carefully explaining each point and highlighting how the legal framework applied to the facts. His reasoning was methodical, his language simple yet compelling, ensuring that everyone in the courtroom could follow his logic. There was no rush, no unnecessary complexity, only clear and persuasive explanation. As he spoke, the judge listened intently. He recognized the unique skill it took to present complex legal arguments in such a clear and effective manner. Every point the teen made reinforced the credibility of his arguments, and the judge found himself nodding subtly, acknowledging the accuracy and thoughtfulness of the presentation. The teen had transformed initial skepticism into admiration, and had done so without any arrogance or self-importance. The spectators were captivated. Some whispered quietly, sharing astonishment at the unexpected brilliance of the teen. Others simply sat with their eyes wide, absorbing the clarity, composure, and intelligence on display. What had begun as a scene of mild amusement had become a demonstration of exceptional talent and preparation. Everyone in the room now understood that they had been witness to something remarkable. The teen's calm and composed demeanor reinforced the seriousness of his presentation. He guided the court through potential counterarguments, addressed ambiguities, and offered clear explanations for each point. His voice was steady, his reasoning thorough, and his approach respectful. By doing so, he reinforced the credibility he had already established and ensured that the courtroom's attention remained focused on the substance of the case, rather than the surprise of his identity. At one point, the judge asked a question, seeking clarification on a specific detail. The teen responded with precision, providing a concise and logical answer that addressed the query fully. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, only clear explanation. The judge nodded appreciatively, and the courtroom absorbed the depth of understanding the teen possessed. His response left no room for doubt. He was not only knowledgeable but also capable of thinking quickly and accurately under pressure. The teen continued to guide the discussion, ensuring that every aspect of the case was examined carefully. He highlighted important points, clarified complex legal issues, and connected the evidence to established laws. His approach was methodical, demonstrating not only expertise but also a strategic understanding of how to present information effectively. Every person in the courtroom, from the judge to the spectators, recognized the skill and effort behind his reasoning. The opposing attorneys attempted to interject, offering objections or alternative interpretations. The teen addressed each calmly and systematically, providing evidence and logical reasoning that reinforced his points. He did not dismiss them harshly. Instead, he treated their contributions with respect, acknowledging their concerns while demonstrating why his analysis remained accurate. This approach further enhanced his credibility and command of the courtroom. As the session progressed, the teen began to summarize the key points of his argument. He highlighted the strongest evidence, explained the legal reasoning clearly, and reinforced the conclusions that naturally followed from the facts. His summary was concise yet comprehensive, ensuring that the judge and everyone present fully understood the significance of the information presented. The courtroom was fully engaged, listening intently as he spoke. The judge, now visibly impressed, spoke again. "You have presented this case with clarity, thoroughness, and professionalism beyond your years. I am grateful for the insight and understanding you have provided. Your preparation and reasoning have ensured that this case will be approached with fairness and accuracy." The teen nodded humbly, accepting the praise without fanfare. The spectators reacted with quiet admiration, recognizing the exceptional skill and composure the teen had displayed. Conversations in the courtroom were filled with awe and respect. Many remarked on the courage it took to appear as a teenager, while possessing the knowledge and experience of a fully qualified attorney. The impact of his performance extended beyond the case itself, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. The teen, aware of the reactions, maintained his focus on the case until all points were fully addressed. He guided the court through final clarifications, answered questions, and ensured that the legal matters were fully understood. His composure, clarity, and strategic thinking left no doubts about his abilities. The courtroom had transitioned from initial skepticism to full respect and engagement, and the teen's efforts were recognized and appreciated. Finally, as the case reached its conclusion, the judge addressed the courtroom. "Today we have witnessed not only a compelling legal presentation, but also an important lesson about preparation, intelligence, and the dangers of underestimating individuals based on appearance or age. This young attorney has demonstrated remarkable skill, and his contributions will have a lasting impact on this case and all who have observed it." The teen nodded respectfully, understanding that the purpose of his unique approach had been fulfilled. He had not sought recognition or admiration, but he had earned both through preparation, clarity, and composure. His work in the courtroom had challenged assumptions, demonstrated intelligence and strategic thinking, and ensured that justice was approached with fairness and thorough understanding. As the session ended, the spectators, attorneys, and judge reflected on what they had witnessed. The courtroom had been transformed, perceptions shifted, and lessons learned. The teen had accomplished more than presenting a case. He had demonstrated the power of preparation, the importance of clarity, and the potential of individuals to exceed expectations regardless of age or appearance. The teen carefully collected his notes, closed his folder, and left the center of the courtroom. His demeanor remained calm and composed, unaffected by the admiration and astonishment surrounding him. The impact of his presence and performance lingered, leaving a profound impression on everyone who had been present. Outside the courtroom, the reactions continued. Spectators spoke quietly in awe, discussing the intelligence, preparation, and composure they had witnessed. The judge reflected on his own assumptions and the lesson in humility he had received. The opposing attorneys reconsidered their strategies and gained newfound respect for the teen's abilities. The day had become a memorable and instructive moment for all involved. The teen walked out calmly, aware of the lessons his presence had imparted. He had not sought to prove superiority or command attention. Instead, he had demonstrated skill, preparation, and intelligence while teaching a subtle yet powerful lesson about perception, respect, and capability. Everyone in the courtroom had learned that day that true talent and understanding are not determined by appearance or age, but by knowledge, preparation, and composure. The story of the teenage attorney would remain in the minds of those present, a reminder that assumptions can be misleading and that the potential of an individual cannot be judged by outward appearances. The teen had left a lasting mark on the courtroom, not only through his legal expertise but also through his strategic foresight, humility, and the quiet authority with which he carried himself. The final moments in the courtroom were filled with a sense of closure and reflection. The judge, attorneys, and spectators had all witnessed something extraordinary, a combination of legal skill, intelligence, and human insight. The teen's presence had changed the dynamic, challenged assumptions, and ensured that the case was approached with clarity, fairness, and thorough understanding. As the courtroom emptied, the whispers and reflections continued. People spoke of the courage it took to present oneself in such a manner, the meticulous preparation involved, and the strategic thinking that had guided every step. The teen's example would serve as a lasting inspiration, demonstrating the power of preparation, intellect, and composure in any challenging situation. The teen's journey through the courtroom had reached its conclusion, but the impact of his actions would be remembered. He had turned skepticism into respect, amusement into admiration, and assumptions into lessons in humility and perception. The courtroom had been forever changed by the quiet brilliance and careful strategy of a young attorney who refused to be underestimated. The day had proven that knowledge, preparation, and composure can overcome prejudice, surprise even the most seasoned observers, and leave a lasting impression on everyone who witnesses true talent.